In the Byzantine Empire, the most powerful man in the building was not the emperor. He was a eunuch, castrated as a child, never commanded an army, never wore the imperial purple. He slept outside the emperor's bedroom door, and for 30 years, across 3 reigns, he made every real decision in a civilization of millions. This is how power actually worked in one of history's longest surviving empires, not through the throne, through the 10 ranks beneath it and the hidden layer that controlled them all. Level 1. The Bound Serf. Your name is on a document you have never seen. It sits in a provincial office somewhere in the empire, a ledger, inked in a clerk's indifferent hand. Your name, your village, your labor quota, the name of the lord who owns the land you work. You cannot read. It doesn't matter. The document does not need your understanding. It only needs your presence in this field, for this lord, in this empire, until you are no longer useful. The Byzantine Empire has a word for what you are, colonus. Technically, you are a free man, not a slave. The legal distinction mattered greatly to the scholars who wrote it down. To you, the practical effect is the same. You stay. Emperor Justinian codified it 6 centuries before you were born, in the law collection that still governs this empire. We ordain that slaves, or tributaries, or tenant farmers shall remain with their lords. The empire also has a word for what happens if you flee, fugitivarius. A state officer whose entire function is to find people like you and return them. The law does not hide what it is. It simply assumes you have nowhere to go. You do not flee. You wake before light. You eat barley porridge. You walk to the field that is not yours and work the soil that is not yours to grow grain that is not yours. The estate clerk measures the yield at harvest. He subtracts the lord's share. He subtracts the state tax. What remains is yours. Most seasons, it is enough. When the rains come late, it is not. You do not complain about this to anyone, because there is no one to complain to who has the power to change it, and no one with that power who would listen. Your father's name was in this ledger before yours. When you die, your son's name will be added below it. When the Lord sells the estate, if he sells it, the transaction document will list the fields, the buildings, the livestock, and the tenant families attached to them. Your name will be on that list. Not as a person with rights, as a line item, as an asset that transfers with the property, the way the clay belongs to this field because someone, somewhere, wrote it down, and there is no document in the empire that will ever write you free. 1 mile away, across the ridge, a man owns his land outright. He has a deed. He pays his taxes to the state directly, not through a lord. He is free, for now. Level 2, the free peasant. You own your land. It says so in the village record. Your name, your actual name, not listed beneath a lord's, appears on a deed that you keep folded inside a clay pot under the floor of your house. Your father left it to you. His father left it to him. 3 generations of the same family, the same field, the same clay pot. The tax collector does not care about your deed. He comes twice a year, spring and autumn. He carries his own ledger. He reads from it without looking at you. The figures are fixed by Constantinople, calculated by bureaucrats who have never seen this valley and never will. You pay. You always pay. Not because you agree with the number, but because the alternative is the kind of attention from the state that no small farmer survives intact. There is a system in this empire called alalengion. It means that your village is taxed as a unit, not as individuals. If a neighbor cannot pay, if the harvest fails him, or if he simply disappears in the night with his family and his oxen, his share does not disappear with him. It redistributes across the remaining households, across you. This is not an accident, it is a design. The empire does not need officers watching every field in every province. It needs neighbors watching each other. And so when you wake before dawn one morning and see that the house across the track is dark and the door is open and the animals are gone, you feel 2 things at once. You feel something close to envy, and then you feel the arithmetic, and the envy hardens into something else entirely. You cover his share that season, and the one after, until the estate records are updated. The great landowners, the dynatoi, the powerful families who hold estates across 3 provinces do not face this problem. They have lawyers. They have connections to Constantinople. When the harvest fails them, adjustments are made. When the harvest fails you, you pay. There is a phrase from the World History Encyclopedia of the period, one that Byzantine Christian writers repeated with discomfort. There was, they noted, A huge divide in terms of living standards between the haves and have-nots, perpetuated by inherited wealth, by family names, by a birth that determined your position before you drew your first breath. You drew yours here. The deed is still in the clay pot. The tax collector does not care about the deed. He will be back in autumn. Freedom in Byzantium is a tax obligation with better paperwork. Above you, in Constantinople, a man runs a shop. He has walls. He has a roof that belongs to him. He has income that does not depend on rain. You have imagined this life. What you have not imagined, because you have no reason to, is that his ledger is also someone else's. Level 3. The Guild Craftsman. You live in Constantinople. You have a shop. 4 walls, a front counter, a back room where you sleep. The street outside your door smells like charcoal and river water and 300 other trades pressing against each other in the same quarter mile. You are a silversmith. Your father was a silversmith. His tools are your tools now, worn smooth at the handles in the exact places where his hands were. By Byzantine standards, you are fortunate. The city is the center of everything. 1 million people, at its height. Covered markets where you can buy Bulgarian linen and Arabian perfume and silk from workshops 2 streets over that operate under direct imperial license. The Hippodrome is a 10-minute walk. There are public baths. There is bread, priced and distributed by the office of the urban prefect, the eparch, who governs Constantinople's commercial life the way a warden governs a prison. With total authority and the sincere belief that this is for everyone's benefit, around the year 900, the eparch's office compiled a document that has governed your life ever since, though you did not sign it and were not consulted. The Book of the Eparch. It specifies, for each of the city's guilds, exactly what you may sell, what you may not sell, the hours during which you may sell it, the quality you are required to maintain, the prices you are permitted to charge, and the penalties for deviation. It is thorough. It is precise. It is, in its way, a masterpiece of administrative control. You are a silversmith. The book says so. You will remain a silversmith. 3 years ago, you submitted a written petition to the eparch's office requesting permission to expand your trade to include copperwork. The copper merchants 1 street over were doing well. There was demand. You had the skills. The petition took 4 months to be reviewed. The answer, when it came, was a single line. Request denied. Outside permitted trade scope. You filed it. You did not apply again. You understood. The guild is not without its compensations. There is a brotherhood to it. The same men, the same quarter, the same feast days. When a craftsman's workshop burns and workshops burn, the guild collects. When a master dies, the guild ensures his apprentices find placement. There is a floor in this life. You will not starve. You will not fall below a certain point. You will also not rise above a certain point. Outside, the city breathes its particular violence. The chariot-racing factions, the blues and the greens, have divided Constantinople for generations along lines that nobody can fully explain anymore. In 501, the greens ambushed the blues during the games and killed 3,000 of them. Inside the Hippodrome, while the emperor watched from his imperial box above in purple, untouched, the factions were not punished in any meaningful way. The games resumed. This is the water you live in. You adjust the silver bracelet on the counter. A woman will come to look at it this afternoon. The price is set. You did not set it. You make enough to eat. You will never make enough to choose. Above you, a man has made enough to be despised for it. Level 4. The Merchant. You are the wealthiest man in your neighborhood. Byzantine art depicts you in hell. Not metaphorically, literally. In the mosaics and manuscripts of this empire, in the illuminated margins of religious texts that monks copy by candlelight in monasteries from Anatolia to southern Italy, the merchant who cheats his customers appears in the lower registers of the underworld alongside murderers and apostates, receiving what the theology of the empire has decided he deserves. Even the honest merchant is regarded with a particular suspicion that no amount of gold can fully dissolve. You profit from other people's needs. The Greek tradition decided, centuries before Byzantium existed, that this was undignified. Byzantium inherited the opinion and kept it. Your warehouse is near the Golden Horn. It smells like pepper and cedar and the particular sweetness of silk that has been folded too long. You trade in spices, in linen, in dyes. You have a house with a 2nd floor. You own 2 horses. By any material measure available in the 10th century, you have done extraordinarily well. You cannot wear purple. Specific shades are banned for your class. The silk you sell, you cannot wear what you sell. The empire has decided that certain colors belong to certain ranks, and no amount of personal wealth changes the rank you were born into. What you can afford and what you are permitted to display are two different lists, and they do not overlap in the ways you would like. The stigma runs deeper than dress codes. Emperor Theophilos, who reigned in the 9th century, discovered that his wife, the Empress Theodora, had a financial interest in a trading vessel operating out of Constantinople. He burned it anyway. The cargo was profitable. It was hers. He burned it anyway. The lesson was delivered publicly, on the water, in front of the city. Even the imperial family was not exempt from the contempt the empire directed at commerce. Even the woman who sat beside God's vicar on earth was not permitted to be a merchant's partner, without consequence. The ship burned for an afternoon. The smoke drifted over the Bosphorus. Everyone on the waterfront understood what it meant. The lesson did not require explanation. You think about that sometimes, when the tax collector comes, because he always comes, and his assessment of your warehouse, the spices, the linen, the folded silk, is not sympathetic. The state takes its share of what you earn, the way it takes its share of everything. You have no guild brotherhood the way the craftsman does. You have no land the way the farmer does. You have capital. And capital in this empire is tolerated the way a useful tool is tolerated, with gratitude when needed, and contempt the rest of the time. You are rich. You are not respected. These two facts exist side by side, every day, for the entirety of your career. You have made your peace with it, more or less. You have what you have. What you do not have is a sword, a uniform, a rank the empire recognizes as dignified. Above you, a man has all three. He does not own them, but the empire gave them to him. And in Byzantium, what the empire gives is worth more than anything you could buy. Level 5. The Thematic Farmer Soldier. The emperor needs cavalry. You are the cavalry. You did not choose this. What you chose, or what your family chose, a generation back, when the arrangement was first offered, was the land. The empire made a proposal. Take this grant of land revenues. Equip yourself as a mounted soldier, and when the call comes, you ride. The grant is called a pronoia. The arrangement is called service. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the recipient of a pronoia was entitled to all the revenues of his estate and to the taxes payable by his tenants, on condition of equipping himself as a mounted cavalryman. You are, in the language of the imperial administration, the absolute master of the peasants who work your estate. You collect their taxes. You settle their disputes. You are the highest authority in their daily lives. This is not a small thing. A year ago, you were a farmer's son. Now men come to you to resolve arguments about fences, and when you die, it all goes back. Not to your son, not to your wife, back to the crown. The land, the revenues, the authority return to the imperial administration as if the arrangement never existed, to be redistributed as the emperor sees fit to the next man who needs equipping. You knew this when you accepted. You accepted anyway, because the alternative was the field, and the field without the grant was harder. You have been trying not to think too carefully about what your son will do. He is 12. He helps you mend fences on the days you are not drilling. He does not ask about the estate's legal status because he does not know there is a question to ask. You have not told him. There is, in the end, nothing useful you could tell him. He will have to make his own arrangement with the empire when the time comes. Every man does. You ride out twice a year for campaign season. The armor you wear, you bought yourself from your estate revenues, the breastplate, the greaves, the horse, the saddle. The empire provides the objective. You provide everything else. When the campaign is over, you return to the estate. You collect the autumn rents. You drill through winter. This is your life. It is not nothing. In the great church of Hagia Sophia in Constantinople, which you have visited once, on the way to a campaign in the east, there is a balustrade on the second floor, where the guards stand during the long imperial ceremonies. Scratched into the marble surface, in letters that are not Greek and not Latin, are the names of men who stood there before you. Runologists who have studied the inscriptions believe one reads Halfdan, a Norse name. A member of the Varangian Guard, the emperor's personal bodyguard, composed in this era, of Vikings who traveled 4,000 miles from their fjords to serve a Christian emperor in a city they could not fully enter, in a language they did not fully speak. He scratched his name into the marble the way soldiers scratch their names into things, because he was not sure he would come home. Because a name in stone outlasts a man in service. Because something in him needed to leave a mark that the empire could not take back when he was gone. You understand this. You cannot say exactly why. But when you rode past Hagia Sophia that morning, heading east with your cavalry unit, you looked up at the great dome and thought about the men who built it and the men who guard it and the men who will be here long after your name has been removed from the estate records and redistributed. Your son waves from the fence as you practice your riding in the lower field. You wave back. You fight for land you cannot pass to him. You govern peasants whose grandchildren will outlast your claim. Above you, a man governs an entire province. He commands armies. He controls taxation across a territory larger than most kingdoms. He has borrowed power, too. He just hasn't realized it yet. Level 6, the Theme Governor. You command 40,000 soldiers. You govern a province larger than most kingdoms in the Western world. Taxation, justice, military deployment, all of it runs through your office. Farmers appeal to you when neighbors steal their water rights. Merchants apply to you for trade permits. Local priests send you gifts at feast days because your goodwill determines whether their monastery keeps its land exemptions. You are, within the borders of your theme, the closest thing to an emperor that most people in this province will ever encounter. You have earned this. 30 years of campaigns. A scar across your left forearm from a Bulgarian ambush in a mountain pass you no longer remember the name of. 3 horses dead under you in 3 different wars. You know the logistics of moving an army across broken terrain in winter. You know which local officials skim their tax receipts and by how much. You know this province the way you know your own body, every weakness, every pressure point, every route in and out. None of this is relevant to what happens next. The letter arrives on a Tuesday morning. A rider from Constantinople, imperial seal pressed into the wax. You break it at your desk. You read it once. It is not long. Administrative reassignment. Report to the capital within 30 days. Transfer command to your second officer. No reasons are given. None are required. You sit for a moment with the letter in your hands. You think about what you might have done. You reviewed the list quickly, as any man in your position does, reflexively, the moment an imperial letter arrives. Too successful last campaign season? Possibly. The emperor tracks which of his generals become famous. Fame is a currency in this empire, and too much of it in the wrong hands becomes a threat. Too close to the Eastern merchants? Perhaps. Someone in Constantinople has been watching something. Someone always is. Or perhaps nothing. Perhaps the emperor simply needs your theme reorganized under a different structure, and your name was at the top of a list. This is the part that is hardest to explain to people who have never held this kind of power. It is not the loss that undoes you. It is the uncertainty, the not knowing. Because the empire does not explain itself to its instruments. You served. The service is concluded. The instrument is being redirected. You call your secretary. You begin organizing the transfer of command, inventory of military assets, status of ongoing tax disputes, briefing documents for your replacement, whoever that will be. You are thorough. You have always been thorough. It is the reason you rose this far, and it is the disposition you will carry with you into whatever comes next, a lesser posting, a comfortable retirement, or something worse, depending on reasons you will never be told. By the end of the week, the province is already running without you. You had everything. You held it by permission. Above you, men who never left the palace, who have never ridden a horse into a Bulgarian ambush, who could not read a terrain map if the empire depended on it, control more than you ever have. Not because they command armies. Because they control something the armies cannot touch. They control what the emperor knows. Level 7, the senior court official. You don't lead armies. You don't own provinces. You have never ridden into a Bulgarian ambush. You have never organized the transfer of a military command. You have, in fact, spent the better part of your adult life inside a building, this palace, these corridors, these rooms that smell like lamp oil and old parchment. You control the numbers. In Byzantium, whoever controls the numbers controls everything. Your title is Logothetes tu Geniko, keeper of the imperial financial accounts. Every tax record from every province in the empire passes through your office. Every assessment, every exemption, every arrear, every irregularity that a theme governor hoped nobody in Constantinople would notice. You notice. You have a staff of 12 and a filing system that your predecessor built over 40 years, and you understand it better than he did by the time he retired. Numbers do not deceive you. People do, sometimes. The numbers never do. The man who rode out of his province last Tuesday reassigned, confused, carrying a sealed letter he didn't fully understand. His tax accounts will cross your desk within the month. You will read them the way a physician reads a patient's history, not with judgment, with interest. Because the pattern of a man's financial decisions tells you more about his loyalties and his vulnerabilities than any intelligence report ever written. This is information. And information, in this court, is the only currency that compounds. There are others at your level, the Magister Officiorum, who controls palace administration, army supply logistics, and all foreign correspondence. The Sacellarios, who holds the emperor's purse, a position that has been accumulating quiet power since the 7th century, when the emperors began to need money faster than the formal treasury could provide it. You know these men. You see them at ceremonies. You assess them the way they assess you, not as enemies, not as friends, but as variables in a system you are all simultaneously serving and navigating. The ceremonies are important to understand. Before you enter any room in this palace that contains the emperor, you dress with precision, not personal preference, precision. The color of your outer cloak indicates your exact rank. The design of your belt indicates your office. The material of the fibula at your shoulder indicates your seniority within that office. Emperor Justinian, 7 centuries ago, made a decree that still echoes through every protocol manual in the palace. Nobody except the emperor himself may embellish their belt or their horse's bridle and saddle with pearls, emeralds, or hyacinths. The decree is ancient. It is still enforced. The hierarchy of ornamentation is the hierarchy of the empire, made visible and wearable and impossible to misread. You have dressed this way for 26 years. You no longer think about it. You adjust the cloak. You check the fibula. You enter the room. You give your report. You withdraw. The ritual is not separate from the power. It is the power, in its most condensed form. To know exactly which color you are permitted to wear, and to wear it without hesitation, is to announce to everyone in the room that you understand precisely where you stand, and that you are comfortable there. Not all of your colleagues are comfortable. Some of them, the newer appointments, the men who rose through military channels and arrived at court still thinking in terms of armies and territory, find the protocols disorienting. They learn, or they don't last. The court is not hostile to soldiers. It simply operates by different rules. Rules that have been refined over 600 years by men who understood that the real levers of this empire are not on the battlefield. They are in the ledgers. They are in the correspondence. They are in the decision about which letters the emperor reads today and which ones can wait until tomorrow. Some of your colleagues at this level are eunuchs, castrated in childhood, brought into palace service young, trained in the protocols before they were old enough to have ambitions of a different kind. You work alongside them without particular comment. They are efficient, they are discreet, they are trusted with access that the military men never receive, because the military men are always being evaluated for threats, and the eunuchs, structurally, cannot threaten in the ways that matter. You file your reports. You know what the emperor will read tomorrow. You know what he won't. Above you, one man uses this knowledge differently. You compile the letters. You route the correspondence. You manage the flow of information through the palace like water through a channel system, directing it, measuring it, ensuring it arrives where it is needed. He decides which letters reach the emperor at all. Level 8. The High Chamberlain. He wakes before the emperor does. The corridor outside the imperial bedchamber is dark at this hour. No lamps yet. He dresses by feel. He has done this for 30 years and no longer needs light to find the right garment, the right belt, the right position at the correct distance from the door. He stands. He waits. The emperor sleeps on the other side of the wood. His title is parakoimomenos. It means in Greek, the one who sleeps beside the emperor's chamber. Historical records describe it as a Byzantine court position, usually reserved for eunuchs, and note that many of its holders, particularly in the 9th and 10th centuries, functioned as the empire's chief ministers. He was castrated as a child. This is not incidental. It is the mechanism. Think about what it means to be trusted in this court. Every general who rises far enough becomes a potential emperor. Every noble who accumulates enough land becomes a threat. Every ambitious man with sons to inherit his position and armies to command at his back is, from the palace's perspective, a variable that requires constant monitoring. The strategos you watched ride out of his province last week was recalled precisely because he had become too successful. The logothetes you met in the corridor yesterday is watched for signs of faction. Every man with a whole body, and a dynasty's worth of ambition is a problem that the palace must manage indefinitely. A eunuch cannot become emperor. The throne requires physical wholeness, an intact body to rule an intact empire. He can accumulate knowledge, influence, proximity to power, decades of institutional memory. He cannot build a dynasty. He cannot pass what he has to sons. He cannot be promised the throne by a foreign power or a rebellious general. His loyalty, in the most structural sense possible, has nowhere else to go. And so he is trusted with everything. He holds the sphendone, the emperor's personal signet ring, used to seal private correspondence to family, to allies, to enemies whose names the public court is never permitted to know. Every letter the emperor sends through the private channel passes through his hands. He presses the ring into the wax. He gives it to the courier. The emperor's name travels across the empire on parchments this man has chosen, worded by scribes this man has approved, to recipients this man has decided should receive them today rather than tomorrow or never. The emperor's name is on every letter. He decides what the emperor says. Consider what this means in practice. In the 9th and 10th centuries, the parakoimomenos was not a ceremonial position. He was, in the language that the court would never use officially but understood completely, the prime minister of a civilization of millions. One man held this office for longer than most emperors' reign. His name was Basil Lecapenos. He was a eunuch. He controlled the Byzantine Empire across the reigns of 3 emperors for more than 30 years. He never wore the purple that the throne reserved for itself. He never commanded an army in the field. He never appears in the histories as the protagonist of any battle, any conquest, any territorial expansion. He made every real decision. The generals fought wars he approved. The logothetes filed accounts he reviewed. The theme governors were appointed and recalled according to assessments he provided to emperors who trusted his judgment more than their own, because he had been there before they arrived and he would, in all likelihood, be there after they were gone. He knew things. He remembered things. He had access to the emperor's private correspondence across 3 reigns. He knew which allies had lied in which letters, and which promises had been made in which seasons, and which debts were still outstanding from agreements made before any of the current generation of nobles had been born. This is what 30 years of proximity to power looks like. He never held a sword. He could not, technically, lead soldiers in the formal military hierarchy of the empire. He was, by every visible rank in the system you have been climbing through, by every title in the Book of Offices, by every dress code in the palace protocol, by every formal register of power that the empire maintained subordinate to generals, to nobles, to theme governors, to the logothetes adjusting their cloaks in palace corridors. Every one of them outranked him on paper. Every decision passed through his hands. Outside the emperor's door, in the dark, he does not think about this. He has not thought about it in the way that a younger man might for many years now. The system is not something he observes from outside. He is the system. He wakes before the emperor because the emperor requires preparation that only proximity can provide. He holds the ring because the ring requires hands that the emperor trusts more than his own. When the emperor rises, he will be here. Above you, above him, sits a man with every title the empire has ever created. A man whose name is pressed into gold coins and stamped on the walls of churches from Constantinople to Antioch. That man cannot walk on bare ground in public. He cannot eat a meal alone. He cannot choose who enters his room. You choose. Level 9. The Caesar. You have a title no one in the Western world can match. You also wake up every morning knowing that this can end before breakfast. Not metaphorically. Specifically, the mechanism exists. It has been used many times. It is, in the long history of this empire, one of its more refined administrative technologies. When an emperor or an emperor's faction decides that a Caesar or a Sebastocrator has become inconvenient, the solution is not execution. Execution creates martyrs. Execution requires justification. Execution leaves a body that people can venerate and a story that people can repeat. Blinding is cleaner. The emperor must be physically whole to reign. This is theology as much as law. The empire is God's kingdom on earth, and God's representative cannot be imperfect. A blinded man cannot rule. He cannot lead armies. He cannot appear at ceremonies with the authority the rituals require. He can live. He can breathe. He can spend the remainder of his years in a monastery in the hills outside Constantinople, praying and being fed, and posing no further threat to anyone. He simply cannot be emperor. Historians estimate that roughly half of all Byzantine emperors across the 11 centuries of this empire were deposed, blinded, mutilated, or murdered. The number is difficult to calculate precisely because it depends on how you count the reigns and the men who held them. But the pattern is consistent enough that Byzantine scholars developed a phrase for the phenomenon. The empire preferred half-lives to clean deaths. A dead rival can inspire rebellion. A blind monk in a monastery is a warning. He is visible, he is contained, he is proof of what happens, presented in human form, available for inspection. You think about this in the mornings, when you dress. The ceremonies require full attendance. You will stand today in the south gallery of the palace church, in your position, in your designated color, at your designated distance from the emperor. The men around you will bow at the correct moments. You will bow at the correct moments. You will exchange the formal greetings that the protocol requires. You will smile at the general who stood too close to the emperor during last season's campaign, and whose name has been appearing in dispatches with the kind of frequency that makes people in this court recalibrate their social positioning. You will smile at him because you must, because he outranks you militarily, even if you outrank him ceremonially, because the system requires the performance of harmony even when harmony is precisely what is absent. You have become very good at this. The mathematics of your position are as follows. The higher you climb in this empire, the more people are below you who want what you have, and the fewer people are above you who have any reason to protect you. At your level, your protection comes from one source only: the emperor's continued belief that you are useful, loyal, and most critically not ambitious in ways that threaten him. This last one is the problem. Because you are ambitious. You would not be here if you were not. But the ambition that brought you this far is now the ambition that you must conceal every day from the man whose favor keeps you intact. You must appear loyal, without appearing capable enough to be dangerous. You must appear capable enough to be worth keeping without appearing so capable that you threaten. This is a calibration that admits no error, and that nobody in this court will explain to you directly, because explaining it would be an acknowledgement that it exists. Last year, a Sebastocrator named it does not matter what he was named. He was popular with the Eastern garrison. He had won a minor campaign against a Bulgar raiding party that the chronicles described with somewhat more enthusiasm than the emperor found comfortable. He attended the winter ceremonies. He smiled at the right moments. He disappeared from the court records 6 weeks later. The monastery records show a new arrival around that time. The entry does not specify the nature of the disability. It did not need to. You watched this happen. You continued attending the ceremonies. You adjusted your smile. In no empire in history was the distance between heir to the throne and blind monk in a monastery so short, so well-traveled, and so efficiently administered. The path is practically an institution. The empire has been walking men down it for 600 years. Above you, the man who built the machine that does this to everyone below him, including himself. Level 10. The Emperor. You are God's vicar on earth. You cannot eat a meal alone. This is not a preference, it is protocol. The imperial table requires attendants, chamberlains, tasters, officials of the household, men whose specific function is to be present while you consume food, so that the act of an emperor eating is never a private act. Nothing you do is private. Privacy, for the autocrator of the Romans, does not exist as a category. It was designed out of the position centuries before you were born. In public, your feet do not touch bare ground. You are carried, or you walk on cloth laid before you purple, always purple, the color that the dye works of the empire produce at enormous expense from sea mollusks, the color that Justinian's fashion decrees reserved exclusively for the throne. When you ride in procession through Constantinople, the crowds press against the barriers and call your name, and the name they call is not quite yours anymore. It is the title, it is the office. It is the thing the empire needs you to be, which is somewhat different from the man you were before you became it. The man who sleeps outside your door at night decides what you know. This is the part the processions do not show. He holds the ring that seals your private correspondence. The letters that reach you have been reviewed. The letters that do not reach you, you will never know what they contained, because the information that you lack is the information you have no way to request. You rule an empire of millions through a channel that someone else controls. You know this, in the way that a man knows something he has decided not to examine too closely, because the alternative is a kind of paralysis that an emperor cannot afford. Your name is on every coin minted in this empire. Every gold hyperpyron that changes hands in Constantinople, in Antioch, In the markets of southern Italy, your face, your title, your name pressed into the metal by craftsmen who have never met you and never will. In the churches, the mosaics show you offering the building to Christ, your face rendered in small squares of colored glass, permanent and idealized, and nothing like the face you see in the polished silver your attendants hold for you each morning. The greatest emperor this throne has ever held was a man named Basil II. He reigned for 49 years. He campaigned almost every season of his adult life. According to the Byzantine historian Skylitzes, after his decisive victory at the Battle of Cleidion in 1014, he captured thousands of Bulgarian prisoners. Skylitzes places the number at 15,000, though other sources give different figures and, as Skylitzes records it, had them blinded and sent back to their ruler, one man in every 100 left with a single eye to lead the rest home. The Bulgarian Tsar, historical accounts report, died of a heart attack when he saw them return. Whether from grief or shock, the chronicles do not specify. He died. Basil had won. Basil II died in 1025, at 67, having never married, having no direct heirs, having spent the better part of 5 decades at war on behalf of a throne that the system around him had made it almost impossible to occupy as a human being rather than a function. Within a generation of his death, the empire he built had begun to fracture. The dynatoi he had spent his reign suppressing regained their power. The military system he had held together through personal authority began to dissolve. He had been irreplaceable. The empire had not built a structure that could survive without him. The greatest emperor in Byzantine history was also proof that the system could not actually sustain what it demanded. The last emperor was a man named Constantine XI Palaiologos. On the morning of May the 29th, 1453, he commanded fewer than 7,000 soldiers inside the walls of Constantinople. The Ottoman army outside numbered, by historical accounts, somewhere near 80,000. He had been offered terms. He had refused them. According to multiple chronicles, he removed his imperial regalia before the final assault, the purple, the insignia, the visible markers of the office, and fought on the walls as a soldier. His body was never found. The name that had appeared on coins, on church walls, in the formal address of every official in the empire for 11 centuries, it ended on a wall, in the dark, without a grave. You are God's vicar on earth. The system that made you has also made you this, the most administered, the most watched, the most ceremonially constrained human being in the known world. The serf in his field cannot leave his village. You cannot leave your ceremony. He has no name on the deed of the land he works. Your name is on everything, and none of it belongs to you anymore. The machine does not distinguish between the man it elevates and the man it grinds. It only runs. Somewhere in a provincial office, a serf's name is written on a tax ledger. He has never seen it. He cannot leave the land it describes. On every gold coin minted in Constantinople, an emperor's name is pressed into the metal. He cannot leave the ceremony that surrounds it. One cannot move, the other cannot rest. Neither chose the system they were born into. Both served it until it was done with them. Every rank between them existed for the same purpose, to hold the rank above it in place. The Byzantine Empire lasted 1,123 years. When it ended completely. No rank survived. The cycle continues.